I think one of the most important things a creative thinks about is their creative identity. When we are young, we look at our creative idols and influences in a way like they were always who they were. And because we don't normally know who their influences are, they always seem so confident in themselves, like they knew they were going to be the artist they were becoming their entire life. So it makes us look at ourselves and question, what's my creative identity? We're going to be talking about that and some tips from my experience on how you can be aware of your own creative identity and how you can become more confident in your identity and relationship with your art and creativity. Stay tuned.
I first started drawing when I was 5, and
My
I
story
just loved
starts
it.
out as in grade 6 art class where I just
I knew I
loved
wanted to
drawing
become an
things
artist
out.
when I got up on stage. And that's my story.
And that's my story.
That's my story.
What's your story? Join us on Time Machine Studios.
So I've always wanted to know how I was going to be remembered and seen as a creative person ever since I was a kid. I wanted to fast forward to whatever year my peak would be at and see what kind of artist I became. But I'm not sure that if my wish was granted, that it would have done me any good, because I feel like it would have disrupted my artistic journey and that I didn't just do things because I knew my future self was going to do it. I started out studying the greats, as they say, dissecting their every move, every song, how they told stories, and how they conveyed emotion. I later then did some research through interviews and other people's dissections on who were the inspirations behind this artist, who made him or her want to make the creative choices that they made, and figuring out how inspiration creates offspring of creativity and how that cycle is created or transformed. Let's give an example. My favorite musical artist of all time is probably Michael Jackson. When I heard Billie Jean for the first time and saw his Motown 25 performance of it, it absolutely blew my mind. And it was amazing. And I was amazed by how much a perfectionist he truly was. Everything he did was so iconic that it's hard to picture a world where Michael Jackson didn't know what kind of artist he was going to be. The moonwalk, the outfits, the ad-libs, it all seemed like destiny. However, if you dig a little deeper, you'll find that Michael's biggest influences were James Brown and Fred Astaire, along with others, but those are the main two. I started to piece together how he combined the sheer rawness and energy and passion of James Brown and with the grace and dreamlike quality of Fred Astaire. He combined both these artists together and added Michael Joseph Jackson to it, and it became a part of his creative identity. Taking something old and making it new is what every artist does to give life to something from the past. And now we can see other musicians such as The Weeknd, Bruno Mars, and Beyoncé all take inspiration from him, and the cycle continues. So after you figure out how inspiration works, try to see what you could develop or borrow from your favorite artists and make your own, because there's a reason why you are drawn to that specific artist. Something in you connects with their creative identity so much that you feel more of yourself when you listen to their music. Study that, be aware of that, and then when you've seen a couple examples and made your own interpretation on how inspiration works, all you have to do left is one thing: experiment. Experimentation is super important in the journey of a creative artist. No one knows what kind of artist you will become until you start actually making music, hearing your own voice back on studio monitors, and becoming familiar with your own voice. Try to do whatever comes to mind. You might find yourself wanting to imitate your favorite artist because that's all you know, and that's totally fine. And I say imitate as much as you want at first, but afterwards, try to see how you would sing a certain song instead of hearing how your favorite artist would do it. Trust me, this is not your final form. You look back at the demos you make at the beginning of your career and they won't even sound like you. You were still a baby on the creative journey, and the more you create and express your voice into the ether, the more comfortable you'll feel creating. And before you know it, people and yourself will start associating certain things with you, and that will become your style. Before you know it, you'll be about to record a song and you know exactly how you're going to sound on it and how you're going to execute your vision of the song. It just takes time, and your patience with the art form will determine how committed you are to this artistic relationship. And now for my favorite segment of the show is the off-script section, Right now, I'm going to be speaking completely off script and I have no idea what I'm about to say, and hopefully something comes up with it. So, honestly, I just got back from work, so I was thinking about what I'm going to do and talk about on this episode because the concept of creative identity is like so powerful, and because it also combines with your own identity, because you have your own identity, but then there's the creative identity. And you see many artists, it's either them and the art are one. Like you see a lot of artists that are literally like all the songs are about their life, like Kendrick Lamar and Tyler and others. And it's very, very personal. So the creative identity and actual identity kind of blend in together. But there are some artists that their creative identity is entirely opposite than their actual identity, similar to an actor taking on a role, basically. And that's why, like, there's that one Zane Lowe episode where he says he gets into a lot of trouble by telling rappers, oh, so there's this character you're playing, and they just walk out the room because sometimes they get offended saying that, like, implying that, oh, your character is fake or something like that, which is super interesting. One interesting case that comes to mind is The Weeknd. Abel says that when he first started making music, he couldn't differentiate between who The Weeknd was and who Abel Tesfaye was, which is his actual name. So I always thought that was super interesting because he says that later on he started knowing the difference, and I wonder if he either changed his own personality to become better, and him and The Weeknd were once the same and then became separated, which explains why he always like unalives himself in music videos and stuff. It makes perfect sense because with every album he's kind of like removing his old self, kind of like a snake skin, and is reborn like a phoenix. But honestly, even though this episode is called finding your creative identity and stuff, I would honestly say don't stress about it. I guess look at it the same way, like kind of like the whole concept of finding love, where if you're looking for it, you won't get it, but if you're not looking for it, it'll come to you. I think it's the same thing with creative identity. It comes to you, it picks you. I think your style, like you don't know what your style is when you first start out. It has to always it finds you. You're drawn to certain things. You're drawn to certain tones and your voice and your ad libs and saying certain words. And that's literally just you expressing yourself, and you're building your creative identity. It only makes sense looking back, as Steve Jobs would say. Like, it'll only be like, oh, so that's why I would do that, because this and this and this. Looking back, you can't like do something and be like, oh, is this my creative identity? Is this my sound? Is whatever. I don't want this to be my sound. Trust me, as I said in the script version, this is not your final form. Literally, you have artists that are like 50 years old still reinventing themselves and still making new of old and all that. So honestly, like, I would truly say just don't worry about it, because worrying might actually take away from the momentum of your journey. You see a lot of old people, like when they ask them like, oh, what are your regrets? Like, oh, I worried too much. Same thing. Other tips I would tell you for finding your creative identity would definitely like try to expose yourself to as much like media as you can, different types of media. Like if you're in music, like Tyler does this thing where he listens to like an hour of music he doesn't normally listen to every morning to freshen up his taste buds and musical palette. I would suggest the same thing. I would like something that I try to do is listen to an album a day, and mostly they're albums that I like or my favorite artists or stuff, because that's normally what I'm into. But I always try to challenge myself and listen to something I don't normally listen to, because that way you're not like stuck to one sound. If you want to take that to the next level, if you're more of a producer, I would like study the scales of different musical scales of different cultures. Like I've been wanting to learn like the Arabic musical scale for like the longest time. I just need to find like the time when I start making like more like Arabic music to sit down and really learn it. Because if you say that you're like a lover of music but you're only listening to one genre, like it's very like specified, it's very It's very narrow. It's a narrow way to look at the world and to be an artist, really. Um, because you don't know where you'll get influences from. Like the other day, like I was listening to Aster Awake, and she's literally like The Weeknd's main vocal inspiration. They literally sound so similar. I was like, oh my god, like how is it literally like no one else has pointed this out? Like she is such an influence to him. So it's literally what that's about. You'll never know who you'll be influenced by. So it's like, like that quote, if you steal from one person, you're a thief. But if you steal from 100 people, you're original. It's literally, that's what it is. Like the energy of being an artist is recycling. It's like a cycle, the circle of life. Shout out Lion King. It's like you take something that you saw here, you write it down, you mix it in with something that you saw like on the wall, like graffiti, whatever. Then like a song you're listening to, like, oh, I really like that line. And maybe you can go on TikTok and maybe there's like another line that inspires you. And then you're basically making a collage. You're making a collage of art. And that becomes yours, That becomes yours because like people say there is no original idea. You know what I mean? So everything is recycled and stuff. Like if you really dig deep into your favorite artists, you find like they really take a lot of influence from like the artists that were impactful in their creative identity, Like a big one that I'm thinking of right now is if you watch the Michael Jackson Smooth Criminal video, the outfit that he's wearing and that whole setup, it's one of his most iconic music videos. But if you actually dig a little deeper, it's an homage to a music video that Fred Astaire did. And he's wearing the exact same outfit and everything, but he made it Michael Jackson, Another story I saw was that like one of his choreographers, obviously Michael didn't do all the choreography, but in some songs, he'd have a certain choreographer he'd work with. And the choreographer was in an interview saying like, oh, I would teach him the dance moves, and then he would do these things like in the middle of it, just like scream and look at the right, be like, whatever. And then he'd be like, damn, like Michael's really owning this shit. He's putting his signature on the shit, And that's what it's about, really. It's like putting your fingerprint on the things that are drawn to you, because like I think we're drawn to certain things like for a reason, and it literally like helps become who we are. You know what I mean? So I would say like exposure, please, like really like expose yourself to as much as you can, even like films, books. You never know where you'll take inspiration from. Like Kendrick Lamar literally says like, I get like most of my inspiration from talking to people and having conversations. Like that's like nothing's more human than that, Other things I would say, journal, get to know yourself, because knowing yourself is also a type of inspiration, I would say. And because the more you know yourself, maybe there are things like hidden in you that you haven't like uncovered yet, and they could literally like be revolutionary and change like any genre or field, because that's how you see it. That's literally what it's all about. Like it's about perspective. Life is perspective, because like the way you might listen to an album or watch a movie is different than somebody else's, so your interpretation is different, which means the way you see the world is totally different, which leads to everyone has their own unique voice. And that's what I would say. If you really want to enhance your creative identity, don't think about your creative identity, And shout out Adele, we talked about this too, finding your sound and stuff. And that's it. And take it easy. You have a lot of time. It took me a long time to like tell this to myself, but you have time. You know what I mean? You're gonna be all right, as they say. And yeah, you will become the artist that you're meant to become. You just need to find it. You need to find it without finding it. Just keep walking. Because it'll be boring if you just know exactly who you're gonna be. Like it feels like you're not growing at all. So that's what I would say. Thank you so much for tuning in, and keep creating. Think, create, entertain, inspire. Thank you. See you next time.